You ever wonder what an action-packed game filled with psychic abilities would be like? No, not that one. I mean the one with the anime characters, obviously. When Scarlet Nexus was revealed, it looked like a wet dream for anime fans. And they even made an anime about it, which apparently is just a watered-down version of the game. Now it does suck to hear that, but at least I don't have to experience the story for a third time. But as for the game, it sets up your average mind-bending Japanese story set in a city where brain-eating mutants are threatening humanity. That's where the main characters of the game come in as part of the team who fights these others with the power of their psychic abilities. The visuals look amazing in the fully animated cutscenes. The bright colors and futuristic aesthetic match up great with the anime vibe. But sadly, most of the time you won't be seeing these types of cutscenes. Instead, you'll get slideshows that basically just show you images of what's happening in the story. At first I wasn't that mad about it because the game isn't focused on just the story alone. Because even some visual novel games out there can do even worse than what they do for these slideshows. But after seeing how many scenes there are that use this method, it got really annoying really fast. It's boring listening to them feed you an encyclopedia's worth of lore and plot with little to nothing keeping you engaged. By the later chapters, I started to get more bored with the story just because of these slideshows. Luckily, there's a ton of voice acting, so at least you won't be forced to read through all the static cutscenes. When you first start the game, you get to choose between playing as Kasane or Yuito. It's not just like choosing male or female though, since both of these characters play a major role in two different sides of the story. And there's also differences in how they play, but there's not too much of a difference. Yuito uses a sword while Kasane has more mid-range with her projectiles. They both have the same psychic ability though, so don't expect too much of a difference. But if you do beat one of their stories, you'll at least be able to start the other story with a new game plus. You'll need to build up the connection with your teammates again from scratch, but your level will still be the same as your first playthrough. Not to mention all your skill points will be available too, so you can start off being hella overpowered. Again, you don't need to play as both characters, but it's highly recommended that you do both routes. Not only will you see different sides of the story, but you'll have different teammates as well. Later on in the story, you'll be able to use all of these teammates, but depending on which personalities or abilities you prefer, you may want to choose between which ones you want later on in the story. You'll also bond with these characters differently depending on who you choose as your protagonist. So you may end up having a totally different connection to Gemma, for example, if you choose Yuito instead of Kasane. Either way, you will have the chance to get to know everyone by the end of just one playthrough. Outside of teammates, the story unfolds in a different way, with the two teams taking their own paths to eventually get to the same ending. It does kinda suck that there aren't two different endings, but the plots are unique enough to stand out. Gameplay is satisfying with different mechanics adding depth to an otherwise normal action game. The team mechanics give you options for who you go into battle with, so you have a choice of the abilities you have at your disposal. Some techniques can be a total game changer, like being able to duplicate the items that you throw and causing a lot of extra stun damage. Or even adding fire or electricity to your weapons for status effects and a damage boost. Then you'll also have some more situational powers like being able to see in the fog. Now honey, I know we can't all have amazing abilities, but this shit ain't really helping to whoop these monsters' asses. Your psychic abilities can create more advanced combos, although I felt it was a bit of a learning curve at first. After you get the hang of which abilities work the best against your enemies, it gets so much easier, and you can really start slicing up these others like butter. You'll be using the objects in the environment a ton in your combos, and the different effects available are interesting. For example, if you throw a barrel of oil, it makes the enemy more prone to fire damage, with the same effect for if you throw water and use electricity. Not to mention the many quick time events that come along with some of the things you can throw. And what I love the most is starting off these battles throwing a chair at the monsters like I'm starting up a nigga moment from the Boondocks. There's also a skill tree with plenty of abilities that make a big difference, like unlocking double jumps, EXP bonuses, and the power to use more than one team ability at a time. It's much more useful than the equipment that you can buy for you and your team. Equipping everyone with better gear didn't feel like it made much of a difference like I wanted it to. There isn't a ton of variety with loadouts, even with the different weapons you can put on your squad. About halfway through the game, you'll start to get weapons that deal more damage, but it always feels like it was naturally scaling with the difficulty anyway. But damn it, I loved using that lava sword from Tales of Arise so much it was sad to let it go when I found something stronger. And that reminds me, I love just how much style these kind of action games have. Anything from Bayonetta to Devil May Cry and even No More Heroes. Scarlet Nexus captures its own sense of style well with finishing moves and cinematics that get your blood pumping with excitement. I love that feeling of power that comes from finishing off larger enemies. Seeing yourself rip that light bulb thing right out of them in the most epic way possible. As I went through each chapter of this game, I kept getting these Astral Chain vibes while playing. Because in Astral Chain, you use different kinds of legions swapping between them to do different combos. And you do something similar to that in Scarlet Nexus, just with your teammates instead. Also, both games take place in a futuristic Japanese city that is threatened by some kind of biomutant monsters. Now it could be a coincidence because Japan does do a lot of weird stuff like that. But I don't know, man, something just smells fishy about that. It's almost like Namco Bandai saw Astral Chain was exclusive to Switch and made their own for every other platform. Obviously it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty funny seeing how similar they both are. One thing I got annoyed with was the lack of variety for the enemies that you fight. You fight maybe 6 or 7 of the same type of enemy throughout the game, to the point where even near the end of the game you have to fight the same 3 types consistently. Not to mention that it's not always the easiest to attack the weak points on these enemies, so they end up being sponges that soak up damage constantly. Either that or you fight these caged enemies that don't do much but be a nuisance. But they will easily die in one short combo as long as you can hit them with the right move. Outside of battles, you're able to build up relationships with your team. You can get to know them better and gain new combat abilities along the way. I'm not normally into these types of things in games, but it becomes a necessity if you want to make your teammates stronger. Certain team skills can only be unlocked by going on these little dates and hangouts with your team. And from time to time, you can even go on missions as part of these relationships. But most of the time, it will be told through the same boring slideshows over and over again. In the end, I can say that I really enjoyed Scarlet Nexus. It does have its flaws with the boring cutscenes that seem to drag on, but the gameplay is what really shines as the best part of the experience. What do you think of this review of Scarlet Nexus? I'd love to hear all your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you all next time.